very good evening to you,
Thank you,
Franklin.
Nina. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So we have, I'm sure you've been following up on the NYS probe, NCPB, we've had CABS, we've had KPLC. We've seen the officials or the suspects being suspected for graft being summoned in the parliamentary committees. Hand in hand with that, we've seen them being summoned in court. They've been arraigned in court, but normally no one gets to hear what happens next. So kindly, let's start off with what are your sentiments in the graft that is going on in Kenya at the moment?
Well, Nina, since early May, we've had a succession of mega scams, of graft, not merely NYS2, Kenya Forestry Service,
Yes,
Kitraco.
where 2 billion shillings were lost.
Yes, Kitraco, Kenya Ports Authority. We've almost run out of letters in the alphabet for all the acronyms, the organizations that almost every week or 10 days, there's just yet another mega scam. We have scandals, of course, involving sugar, whether it's contaminated, counterfeit, illicitly imported, or legally imported. Nobody seems to be sure of. And unless it was legally imported, somebody must have been paid off somewhere along the line. That has taken our attention away from all the other scandals that have been breaking, however, since the beginning of May, which are, in fact, beyond Nigerian-style corruption now. We're looking at Kenya Power because it does have an impact on everybody. The electricity sector here, whether it's KenGen with the independent power producers or Kitraco, which has now been found to have some ethical and legal problems, or Kenya Power, has a direct impact on everybody's lives in Kenya. The fact that we have unreliable power, electricity that is not affordable, means that we'll never reach the success in manufacturing. Our health facilities are paying much more for electricity. That is unreliable. They also, if they're able to put them in, need generators, standby generators.
In a nutshell, what
In a
we can
nutshell,
say
this
is
kind of
most
corruption
ministries...
is destroying the economy. We had a situation where Nairobi County was disconnected for failing to pay its bills.
Yes.
And you will remember that the Nairobi County was clamping Kenya Power vehicles, or if Kenya Power was coming.
bodies fighting
it was
against
like
each other.
watching the mafia. It was like watching gangs going after each other. Keep in mind that the power companies that we have, that is Kenya Power, Kitraco, and KenGen, are mainly government-owned. Kitraco 100%, and essentially Kenya Power and KenGen. Majority, more than majority, if you count the National Security Fund, development, this and that. But they all pay taxes to the government. They also collect their taxes on behalf of, I guess, the government. Because Kenya Power, when you look at your bill, includes all sorts of levies for rural electrification, ERC. There are amazing charges and fees on those bills that go to basically pay authorities, agencies, and regulatory commissions, it seems, to do the same work. In other words, we have triplication of functions within the electricity sector. And that makes everything we do more expensive. It means that your workers who are demanding higher wages is because they can't pay for the electricity. They're paying more for food. You're paying more for water, because everything runs on electricity. And until we actually come up in the power sector with an agreement that the objective of the plethora of agencies, the different companies, is in fact that the objective is to supply affordable and reliable electricity to all consumers in Kenya. When you're talking now about Kenya Power, yes, it looks like the transformers. There are some egregious facts coming out.
Procurement,
yes.
Transformers that have not, are practically not being used. I mean, we've had cases of people living, there was a case of one person living in Webuye who says he's paying for electricity, but there is no electricity. And when the Kenya Power officials or the agents that are dealing with that particular area come up to get money for their bills, they say all this money is in preparation of the electricity that is going to come in just, they say, soon. So should Kenyans or even the electricity consumers, which is of course the common Mwananchi, should they be satisfied with seeing the 19 suspects or the bosses of KPLC being released on 1 million shilling bail?
Well, the bail or bond is a constitutional right. They should understand that these people are in fact innocent until proven guilty. This is not sophistry, it's not mere words. But we always forget about 16,000 at least Kenyans in remand awaiting trial because they cannot make bail, they cannot make bond, and perhaps they can't afford lawyers. So we have a fairly huge population sitting in jail, waiting to go before a magistrate, oftentimes waiting beyond the sentence that they might receive if they would be able to plead guilty.
This, of course, excluding the bosses of the KPLC. But Andrew, very quickly, maybe you can take us through the steps of what exactly is supposed to happen once they reach that stage. I mean, Nuruddin Haji, as the new Director of Prosecution or Public Prosecution, has done his job. He's presented the documents, he's done his investigation, presented it to court. Now they're being prosecuted. The court now says that they've released them on bail. What next? Because normally, this is usually the end of it. When it comes to the common Mwananchi hearing the news, it ends at, or rather it stops at, okay, they were released on cash bail. So what exactly is supposed to happen next? How is justice going to be served when it comes to martyrs' graft in Kenya?
Well, you know, you've raised some very important issues. And as a graduate of New York Law School before I arrived here in 1981, I've been here for 37 years as a former Marine Corps officer, having been in business with selling investments and the like here, owning homes. The point is that, in my opinion, the investigations have all been rushed. In my opinion, and I'm not privy to the DCI portfolio. I'm not privy to their standard operating procedures. I've had an excellent experience back in 2009 with the Banking Fraud Investigation Unit, an outstanding chief inspector who was able to go after people who had defrauded me and got my money back. So there are excellent people throughout CID or DCI who can do the job. The sort of graft and corruption we find in all of these organizations, that is multiple payments to non-existent companies or companies that exist only on paper, companies that have been established and facilitated by lawyers, and we only have, 9,000 lawyers in this country. We have lawyers who are, in fact, in some cases, certifying documents so their clients can open bank accounts, certifying true copies of passports and national ID cards. And as we saw with the Artur brothers lawyers who admitted on television, they had never met the Artur brothers when they were certifying true copies of documents that they'd never seen the originals of. So a lot of this sort of layering, this money laundering, it's not that complicated, but it involves a situation where unless you get a handle on what goes on in an office, who writes the checks? We know there aren't checks, we have IFMIS. But who approves the procurement standards, SOPs? You know, there's a difference between what you have on paper and what is actually done, and that's true everywhere. There's a difference whenever you're dealing with human beings. But gaps and lapses that open up in large organizations that are dealing with a tremendous amount of money in a country where accountability is lacking, where seniors are not accountable for everything their juniors do or fail to do. And what you've pointed out is we don't hear about investigations. What happens after? Are all those sheafs of paper, are they really sufficient, not merely to bring people into court, to charge them with offenses, but ultimately to convict? Ultimately to convict.
And get the money back.
Get the money back or put people inside. Sometimes getting the money back is very difficult because you don't know where it's gone. But again and again, we have a system where we have we do have genuine protections that are required. You know, you just can't take people out on the street and shoot them.
Yes.
The Chinese may get away with it, but then they have problems at SGR.
So what exactly are Kenyans supposed to expect after this? After being seen in court, I mean, thank God we are able to, as the media houses, we're able to view this court sessions and relay back to our viewers, which is, of course, the common Mwananchi, to properly understand all the sessions and the process. But what is supposed to happen next? What should Kenyans expect?
Next
is this going to be
investigations that tell you who signed what, who appointed who? You know, there is.
And according to your experience, do you think that we I mean, Sittard, you've seen these cases before. So according to your experience, do you think that finally Nordin Haj will get these cases solved? Are Kenyans finally going to see justice?
I would like to see him accomplish what he wants to do about extraditing people who have been fighting extradition. The former head of KPLC, the former managing director of KPLC, and an assistant commissioner of finance, assistant minister of finance, Chris Okimo, and the government of Jersey in the Channel Islands, a tax haven, an offshore financial center, has been requesting their extradition for years. And they've been fighting it according to our laws. They've been able to avoid being sent to another jurisdiction to be tried over economic crimes.
All right.
And this is, and yet, notice the fact that this dates back to the, to crimes or activities that date back to the late 1990s. In other words, and that is in Kenya Power. Again. So when people ask, they always ask, when is the rain? When did it start beating us? We can actually look back almost 20 years. But we can also look back to the fact that we have broken up our power sector, so nobody is really accountable or responsible for delivering light to my house. Whether it's somebody at Lake Turkana Wind Project, they can't hook up to the mains because Catraco never connected them, because Catraco has problems with landowners. But we're going to pay. We are now paying for Turkana Wind. Whether they are able to ship electricity to our homes, we will pay as consumers.
All right.
When the coal project finally, who knows what will happen in Lamu, we'll pay for that even if it's not hooked up to the national grid, because let's face it, if you're an investor, you write a contract that is approved by the government, by whoever is buying it, whether it's KenGen or the like, and you're not going to invest in a large-scale project here unless you can start recovering your money. Now, if Catraco is unable to hook you up to the national grid, should you as the investor suffer? Well, no, you write a contract that says you'll pay me anyway, whether or not I can deliver electricity to Andrew Franklin's house. Now, when you talk about the common Wenanchi who should be concerned about Kenya Power, I would suggest that Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KEPSA, KNCCI, they're members in the so-called private sector here.
Yes,
Industrialists, people we all know, they should be concerned because everything they produce is more expensive than it has to be. They should be concerned because, in fact, as manufacturers, they will not be able to achieve the objectives that President Kenyatta has set in manufacturing as one of the four pillars.
Yeah, the big four agenda.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You cannot reach manufacturing. You cannot be competitive.
So are those the bodies that are set to bring change? Is that what we should be waiting for?
We should be demanding that the private sector speak out about people they know, about the people they go to dinner with, about the people who have been representing us. When it comes to going to Davos, to the World Economic Forum and places like that, for power we do this, we have innovation. The same people are now in the dock who very often are wined and dined as paragons of innovation. This is no longer funny. It never has been funny. But in fact, until the private sector...
It's not something that should be taken for granted.
You shouldn't take it for granted. You shouldn't believe that the people in the boardrooms are thinking the way I am. And I'm no communist, but I've been here for 37 years. And you can go broke paying for unreliable electricity. How many times do you have to put in generators, power backup systems, and the like? People need to get angry. People, not the common Wenanchi who should be angry as well, but the middle class.
All right. All right, welcome back. You're still watching Ebru Primetime News. Thank you very much for keeping it Ebru TV. Now, before we went on the break, we were just trying to quickly wrap up this interview. And our topic of discussion, of course, is a truth when it comes to Martyr's corruption. Andrew, very quickly wrap it up. What are your final words when it comes to Martyr's corruption? What words would you leave our viewers with?
Well, the words I would leave the viewers with is to be afraid, to be very afraid. Because when you were listing the agencies and the corruption scandals, you also forgot about fertilizer and a boat that sailed away. See, we kind of have this, there is this plethora, this myriad, this almost barrage of scandals that it's almost difficult to keep track of them. Whether you're here And what I think what the Wenanchi people need to wake up and demand that the media report, not just superficially, not just sort of like, oh, look at these people in handcuffs, and getting involved in all this sort of politicizing every one of these scandals. These are people who are in the same political class. We all know each other, and in fact, they're not our friends. So I think people need to demand that if we can agree that the objective, for example, in the power sector, electricity sector, is in fact reliable and affordable electricity delivered to as many consumers in this country as we can, then we would actually look at recombining KenGen, Catraco, and Kenya Power. This is because it reduces the lapses and gaps. The culture of lack of accountability in this country means that if I'm paying a huge amount of money at my home, and for whatever reason I find that the power is too much to pay for, I'll be disconnected. That's extortion. But in that bill is so much extra costs and charges and so much waste that it's almost impossible to get a handle on it. And I think for me, if I'm admitting this, what does the common Wenanchi think out there?
All right. And so just to get this straight, the main problem is accountability.
Yes, and I think we need to support Paulo Mboya and those people who he's been almost single-handedly going after Kenya Power.
All right. So the main problem, we do support him, of course. The main problem being accountability. Now, the managers or the bosses in these different bodies have not been able to be accountable for the millions and even billions of shillings that have been used, which is the taxpayers' money, I repeat. Should these bodies, do you think the solution would be the bodies being dissolved or the management in these bodies being changed?
We need to also ask, the voters need to ask what their representatives are really doing in Parliament.
All right.
When MPs or senators, members of the National Assembly are sitting here and in other studios in the morning or evening, whenever, expressing helplessness, that what can I do? We're going to have another commission. The National Assembly is
we've even heard the president saying the same thing.
But he doesn't express necessarily helplessness. We have the parliamentarians who represent the voters, who are accountable to their voters.
So it goes back to the parliamentarians?
Yes, most definitely.
All right. And with that, I'd like us to shut this interview down. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. And I think there's a lot to be gained from the conversation that we have just had during this more than 15 minutes interview. So that was Andrew Franklin, who's an analyst, not only security analyst, but economic analyst and political analyst as well. Good evening.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Now,